Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tonight we're going to be talking about promoting student self-management and ownership. This is part of the Portrait of a Nevada Learner Pedagogy series. And this is, I think, PNL, which is the abbreviation I'd like to use, 6. So this is the 6th one for the fall. We will not have another one until February. So get a little time off in December and January, but this is number 6. Tonight, let me introduce myself briefly. And I know most of you already know me. I love it when I see all these names up there that, already know the names and so fun. But my name is Kim Loomis. I retired from Clark County School District in 2019 as the director for online and blended learning. I was a classroom math teacher for 10 years. Prior to that, I did some teacher on special assignment for the RPDP here down in the Southern California, as well as moving into school administration to a coordinator in curriculum and instruction, did high school reform, which absolutely loved being able to rethink how schools should be done. But my last 10, 15 years or so was really in the virtual digital learning world, from being a virtual math teacher to also being a director for online and blended learning here in Clark County School District. I do have a book. It's called Think Outside the Box, the CIA of Blended. We'll hit that a little bit today. And that book is basically on the 10 models of secondary schools that we saw here in Clark County as they rolled out some of their digital learning programs. So our agenda tonight is we're going to go ahead and start with our welcome. And if you're joining us late, our chat or our inquiring minds question was, what was your favorite holiday song? So if you want to throw that up into chat, please do so. I see Nat King Cole's Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire. I love it, Michelle. Thank you. I will talk a little bit about the Portrait of a Nevada Learner, hit the CIA blended or balanced blended classroom a little bit tonight before we hit into self-management and ownership, and really trying to think about how we can develop some habits of mind, not only in ourselves, but in our students, so that we can get them to some of those portrait ideas that are in our PNL. All right, in chat, if you've already put your song in, thank you so much. But I got another one for you. What word below? These are the 4 elements that we can find in the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. Intrigues you the most? So we have empower, impact, connect, thrive. Which one of those is kind of like intriguing to you? Like, I wonder what that looks like. Oh, I like it. Empower, thrive, empower. Got some good ones coming across. A lot of empowers, a lot of thrives. That's a good balance there. So connect and impact seems to be okay. Not as intriguing as the others. Okay. I love it. Thank you guys. I really, really appreciate it. Love seeing that. A lot of empowers. I always feel like that's what the PNL or the Portrait of a Nevada Learner is about. It's about empowering our students and really empowering us, because we talk about releasing some of the learning, as you'll hear tonight when we talk about the CIA or the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 model, where we get empowered to do a lot of teaching by walking around. Thank you guys for sharing in there. So we're going to talk a little bit about Portrait of the Nevada Learner. Remember, it was finalized in May of 2023. We had a lot of work before that, and it's still, right now, we're still trying to get it out and get schools and teachers to use it and think about not the Portrait of a Nevada Learner being a separate class, but how do we bring in these elements into our classroom? And you already saw the 4 elements: empower, connect, impact, and thrive. And those actually come from 4 questions that might be in a student's internal voice. So when we're thinking about empower, which was one of the words that came up a lot in chat, that's inside of a student's what we call internal voice. They might be saying, how will I grow in my learning? Thrive came up a lot too. And the thrive question is, how will I thrive? And what does thrive mean? I noticed a lot of you mentioned that as your most intriguing world. Well, guess what, guys? You're in for a world of treat, because tonight we're really going to hit that thrive portion. Remember, the Portrait of a Nevada Learner actually has 4 sections. But like I said, tonight we're really going to focus in on thrive. There's empowering, connecting, impacting, and thriving. And so when we look at thriving, and when we go into our breakout groups here in just a moment and start thinking about what does that look like in our classroom, let's think about the elements that they highlight or bold into the thrive area. So when we're thinking of thriving, what they really are trying to say is, how do we stay resilient? How do I be courageous when I'm facing challenges? How do I take risks? And how do I get over failing? It's so hard sometimes. Students that are so adamant that, oh, I failed, and they shut down that learned helplessness. Well, we really need to help them do is to learn from their mistakes. And tonight's topic about ownership and self-management really gets to that. And it also gets to the fact of we want them to have intellectual agility. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means sometimes unlearning and relearning so that we can evolve in our learning. So, somewhere along the line, somebody told me if you practice something 7 times, your mind will remember it. Well, what if I remember that 12 times 12 is 112, 7 times? Oh my goodness, then I have to unlearn that 12 times 12 isn't 112, it's 144. But that's part of it. We have to think about how do we help students with that unlearning and relearning. And they're in an environment, their world, this technology world gives them so many tools. Like last time we were together, we talked about artificial intelligence and how we can do those types of things to help us with our learning and our unlearning. But we want to also be a person of integrity. So especially when we talk about artificial intelligence and we talk about, knowing that what I do is ethical. So if I do use ChatGPT to help me draft, I love to say draft essay, then I need to say that I helped it. That's part of the ethics, right? That's part of being a person of integrity. That's saying I didn't use ChatGPT to do all of my essay, but I did use it to help me with my first draft. So having that person of integrity, staying true to my values, staying true to my beliefs when we put them in small groups and not fighting for what I think is right, but being open-minded in saying that I do have an opinion and my opinion counts just like everybody else in this group. So when we think about rolling out, those of you that want to get that 5 extra hours, rolling out ownership and self-management in your classroom, think about how am I getting my students to thrive? How am I helping them be resilient and courageous and learn from mistakes? And do they have that intellectual agility to unlearn and relearn and learn from their peers and understand that they too, when we're in small groups and we're working on group projects, that they too have value to bring to that group? When you look at thrive, and that came up a lot in our breakout or in our chat there, that was a word that intrigued us. So when you're looking at thriving, and we went through it just a moment ago, what classroom strategies come in mind? Welcome back. Welcome back. So when you think about thriving, and I know that was one of the words that came up with intriguing, there's lots of different strategies that can come in mind. So when you go into the Canvas course, and if you're thinking about going for those 5 additional professional development credits and pulling in activities and things that really bring out student management and student ownership, there's lots of different avenues and different places you can go when you're thinking about how to pull out that thriving in your classroom. So tonight we're going to talk about a little bit of them, but I want to start with what my belief is the core business of school is relationships and learning. And yes, that is a hierarchy. I think relationships come first because once we have a relationship with a kid, they're willing to learn. Sometimes some kids are harder to reach, but we just need to start with that relationship with our kids. And part of that is going to be really working on the culture in your classroom. And we're going to talk tonight about a lot of different ways to bring in those relationships to help the process of learning. So when we talk about the culture of learning in a classroom, or we talk about culture of learning, there are 3 different things when we talk about the culture. So the first part starts with exactly what we were just talking about is relationships. We want in the culture of our classroom, we want kids to have relationships not only with us, but we want to also have them with each other. That's really hard to do if kids are always in a row and always doing independent work. So as you're thinking about what does student ownership and what does student self-management look like? Well, part of that is getting them together, getting them to have relationships with their peers. And just like you saw in Thriving, is really thinking about what does that look like that I have intellectual value in what I believe and know. Well, when I share that with others, then I have ownership of it. The second piece that comes with culture of learning is structures. When we talk about structures, we talk about classroom routines. You probably have a callback in your classroom. When you hear me clap with me, those types of things. When I say mighty, you say Mustangs, whatever your classroom routines are, might be champ or slants, and we'll talk about a little bit about those. Maybe you even have a social contract. That's a great place to start with your students, building that culture in your classroom. But also what we want to do is we want to have not boring, but we want to have relevant and engaging curriculum. We want to intrigue students. We want them to be curious about learning. We want them to not want to stop. And that comes from us creating a path in our lesson plans, in our pedagogy, that is a path to exciting and fun learning. Now, what we're going to talk about tonight really helps with that ownership part and that culture of learning. That third piece oftentimes is the piece that's often missing. So we talked about it in some of our other series when we were talking about the portrait of a Nevada learner and having that intentional focus on the learning process. And we're going to spend a little bit of time, because if students understand the intentional focus, who am I as a learner? What is the role of my teacher? Those types of things. If we have that intentional focus, it changes the culture of learning in our classroom. So here it is, thinking about the expectations that you think in your classroom. I'm a true believer that we're co-creators in this world. When things are happening so fast, like we talked about, artificial intelligence, when I can go on to Magic School and I can get me a lesson plan and I'm going to roll it out, I'm co-creating with an artificial intelligence, but I should be co-creating learning in my classroom as well with my students. So ask your students, if you haven't, ask them to define learning. Ask them what they think their role is in the classroom and what they think your role is in the classroom. Don't let them think that your role is to pour stuff inside and they get to mix it up and generate something. No, no, no. We are co-creators. We're working together. I'm a true believer that as an instructor in the classroom, I am creating a path, just like a trail down a hike that I'm going, and those kids are coming with us. But you know what? Their eyes and their ears and they're all over the place. They're on the ground, they're in the air, looking at the sky, looking at the leaves. They're all over the place. It's their journey. Right? It's their journey. I can create the path, but I need them to take it. So again, if you haven't done this already, please try it as you go through this time and thinking about, I haven't really done that. Pull this one out, because what we want to do is we want to get kids engaged. Now, there are 3 levels for us to get to ownership. And you see that on the far right there. We have to start with doing, where students are actually doing their work, right? Sometimes they look engaged, they look like they're doing, but if you ask them, they could tell you what they're working on, but they don't know why or where. They're just like, she gave me a worksheet, I'm working on this, or I'm supposed to be working on iReady. So they know what they're working on. But when we want to get them to understanding, that's when they're actively engaged in the thinking of learning. That's when they start thinking, when we go back to that culture, the process of learning. So not only can they tell me what they're doing, and oftentimes when I go into classrooms, I'll not ask them what they're doing. I'm like, why are you doing this? And they're like, oh, well, we're learning the scientific method because we know that we're going to go do a lab here in a moment. And if I don't know the steps and the procedures, then I won't do well on the lab. So they know why they're doing it. What we want to get them to eventually, after we get it through the why, and they understand the why and they can articulate the why to you or even to guests in the room, we want to get them to owning. And when they are owning, that's when they're taking active lead and responsibility. So not only do they know what they're doing or why they're doing it, but they can also articulate how they're doing it. They can explain the strategy they're using. Well, right now I'm using guess and check because I really don't know if it's a repeated addition or if it's a multiplication. And I know that if I use either one, I'll get there, but I don't know what 12 times 12 is. I think it's 112. Again, you've 7 times he's learned 112, but we understand. They understand why they've selected the strategy that they're using. I'm going to use guess and check because I really don't know what 12 times 12 is right now. So I'm going to do repeated addition of 12 times. So that's how we can move the students. And it's an easy way to remember. If students can articulate what they're doing, that gets them to the low level. They're engaged. They're engaged, but it's a low level engagement. We want to get into higher level. So ask them why they're learning. And this is an easy one. You could do an exit ticket out the door and say, what did we do today? Why did we do it? What strategies did you use? Right? Helping them take some ownership of their learning, helping them say, well, why did we do that? When did we do that? When could you use this same strategy we used today in another book? We did the character art, we did the plot. What does that look like in another book? Find another book that you like to read and try it again. Where can we use these strategies again in the future? That's where we start getting the owning, right? The doing is just the what, the why is the understanding, but we want to get them to the how and the when they can apply those strategies in the future. So that takes a mind shift, not from us as much as when we talk about our classroom pedagogy, because we have to change some of the structures in our classroom, but it really takes a shift on our students. So they're no longer passive consumers, they're active agents in the classroom. They're no longer just sitting back and receiving information. What we're doing is setting up a playlist. And if you're in that other class, you can set up a playlist that has lots of different videos or articles that you want the kids to go to. And they're making decisions on what video they're going to, what article they're going to, and they're creating their knowledge, they're synthesizing it, they're going to that higher order, and they're really in a collaborative area instead of a compliance. So it's a shift in the mindset. Now, I think today's kids are ready for this. I really do. And it has time for us to set up some structures for them to get there. Be able to get there, we have to have some words that help them identify. If we go back today earlier when we were talking about thriving, it talked about resilience. That's a really big word. I'm going to give you a small word that we can share with kids that they can understand. And we're going to go through this video. It's from the Florida Virtual School that talks about grit. And if you can hear it, go ahead and give me a thumbs up.
This is a story about grit and why it might just be the key to your success. So what the heck is grit? Well, officially it's the combination of persistence and resilience. Big words, huh? Persistence means you keep going even when the going gets tough, and you stay focused on the task without getting distracted. Resilience is toughness. When you get knocked down, you bounce back up and try again. When you have both of these qualities, we call that grit. And once you have grit, you can learn anything. But why is grit so important to learning? Because when things are easy and you're coasting along, it's nice. It might even be fun for a while, but you're not learning. Learning comes from struggle, from trying and failing, then learning from your mistakes. Remember when you first learned to ride a bike? Or swim? Or play an instrument? Or do long division? It seems impossible at first, and if you gave up after the first try, it would be. But you're persistent. You keep trying. You start to get the hang of it. You practice, you work at it a little bit at a time, and eventually it starts to get easier for you. You learn from your mistakes, and the more you work, the easier it gets. But remember, learning is hard work. That's why you need grit. Because the key to success in school and life is how you react when things don't go your way. So the next time you're struggling with something in your life, or in your science book, just remember, it's part of learning, and with a little hard work and a lot of grit, you can do things that once seemed impossible.
I love that video. And it says a lot of the same words that our P&L talked about. In particular, having resistance, understanding, having a good mindset. What does it mean to fail or not succeed and get yourself back up? And you know what, students have been doing it, especially if you think about in today's day and age. They've been doing it in their video games. Most of them are doing it in their sports. They know that the first time I throw a ball up into a hoop, it's not going to go in, but they're willing to try and try and try again. Or if I'm playing a game, I'm going to get killed and I'm going to try and try again. But what we need to do is take that resilience, take that grit, and bring it into the classroom. So this is is a great way to start introducing, if you haven't, some vocabulary that you want the kids to take ownership, because that's part of it. If they have that vocabulary, or you have that vocabulary in your classroom, you can talk about what it's going to take to be successful in your classroom. So let's take a moment, just brief, and talk about the CIA of blended. I know most of you have been with me, so we'll go through this real quick. The CIA is the curriculum, the instruction, the assessment of blended learning, or what I like to call the one-third, one-third, one-third balance. When I do that, I talk a lot about Webb's depth knowledge. If I use a low number like 1 and 2, which I believe that we can give away to the digital curriculum, to deliver some of those facts, basic concepts, and explaining ideas. We can give that way to digital curriculum so that we can design lessons that take our kids to the higher order strategic thinking, extended thinking, and like in Bloom's taxonomy there, that's the analyze, the evaluate, the create, those fun things that we're going to talk about tonight so that they can take ownership and self-manage. So again, my definition of blended personalized learning is taking the wisdom of teachers with your caring hearts, add it to the adaptability of technology so that we can create a personalized learning space for each and every student. Now, you could see those three images: the tech, the teacher, and the student are our one-thirds. One-third technology, one-third teaching, and one-third releasing the learning to our students. So I like to say release sometimes to digital curriculum. Sometimes, a third of the time, I'm guiding instruction, and I can do that with direct instruction. I can do that with small groups. I can do it with a playlist. Later, we're going to learn about choice boards and menus. And a third of the time, we want to release to our students to put them in a situation where they're actively engaged in some type of authentic assessment, where they're demonstrating higher order thinking in Bloom's taxonomy or in Deb's Web of Knowledge. So tonight, really, we're talking about the third, where the students are. We've talked about the digital curriculum before. We've talked about teaching before. Tonight, we're really talking about how do we get those students into active engagement so that they can self-manage and they can own their own learning. So tonight, when you're thinking about what does it look like in my classroom, think about, okay, when I release the digital content, that's great. When I'm looking at the depths of knowledge in my standard, I really want to focus this time. I really want to focus on what does it look like when I release to my students. So as you're thinking about, and we're going through this ownership, if you don't release to their students, they're never going to own. So you've got to help the students with their behavior. And that's where that self-management comes in, right? Understanding that you can't sit there and beat on the table all day because you're going to drive people crazy. So we have to help them with that self-management as well so that we can release. And when we release, what we're really thinking about is the 4 C's: that critical thinking, that communication, collaboration, and creative thinking. So what we want to think about is performance tasks. How are we asking students to get to that higher order of Bloom's taxonomy up there into analyzing, synthesizing, and creating? Because we could have low level communication. We could have low level collaboration. But what we really want to do is get them up into the other C's, like critical thinking, where they're looking at problems in new ways and they're linking learning across subject areas. We want to not just be creative in doing a nice, pretty design or making a video or a podcast, but really start thinking about how does technology and innovation help me in my creation and demonstration of my learning. Really, what we want to do is we want to spark a 5th C in our students. We want to spark curiosity. We want them to have that curious to say, I want to go deeper. And with the way we do that is oftentimes with another C, I like to say, which is choice. When we give kids choice, it helps tremendously. If I say you can watch one of these 2 videos, that in itself helps our students feel like they own a piece of their learning and a piece of their classroom. If you want to get deeper into this, I'm going to highly suggest that you spend a little bit of time and look at the ISTE standards. You'll notice here that in the ISTE standards, one of the things that they talk to is actually the 4 C's, exactly like we were just talking about a moment ago, which is, look at that, empowered learners. Another one that they've got there. Innovative designer, that's creating, right? Creative communicator, conceptual thinker, I'll go ahead and throw up into chat the link to the ISTE standards if you want to spend some more time there. But really, when you think about the technology and the way that our schools are changing and the access that they have with, one-on-one Chromebooks, with access to the webs and all the AI and everything out of there, how do we get them to those higher order thinking? So when we do that, what we want to do is we want to do some peer-to-peer. We want to start thinking about how can I build in teamwork into my classroom? And even beyond that. So when we get the kids to owning their thinking, right? Go back to that thriving in the Portrait of a Nevada Learner. How do we get them beyond just doing and even just knowing why we're doing it, but actually giving them some choice and getting some personal interest research, or maybe get them really engaged in performance tasks? Those are some great things. Other ways we can do it is open-ended questions, or what we call document-based questions, Socratic seminars. This way that students are using their academic vocabulary to demonstrate their learning and pique their curiosity. And a great way to do this, I'm a big fan of peer-to-peer. I love, and that's why I give you guys breakout groups here, because Kim doesn't know everything. There's somebody else out there that knows more than Kim. So a great place to get some of this, because we were talking about sharing our work, is at PBL Work. So Buck Institute, and they're talking about, collaborative projects where you can get kids together in groups of 3s and 4s with a driving question that has inquiry and innovation, and it brings in exactly what our Portrait of a Nevada Learner wants. It wants those lifelong skills, that grit, that resistance, that agility in our learning, failing and moving forward. These are great projects. And not only that, students bring their ability to the table. There might be somebody in that project that knows more math than me, but guess what? I'm a great artist. I can do a piece of this project that another person can't do. So that's when we start working about those collaborative projects. And this is in our Canvas course, guys. You'll see links not only to PBL Works, but also to some of these engagement activities. They could be small. I love Quiz Trade. They can do it with vocabulary cards. They can do it with facts. I love Quiz Trades. Give everybody a card. They quiz the person. They exchange cards. They move on. Well, Mark Dillinger made a lot of different video protocols that we can bring into our classroom. Like, for instance, I love World Cafe, because in that one, I am definitely using my academic vocabulary. I am actually showing others in my group, not just my teacher, but other students in my group, the things that I have learned. So they're in our Canvas course, you're going to see a link to these activities so that you can see those. And you might consider bringing one of these into your classroom over the next couple of weeks. The key here, guys, truly the key here, is to help our kids get from the top of this pyramid from Edgar Dale, which was created way back in 1969, that says only 10% of what we read, we remember. Heck, for me, I can never remember that I've read a book before. I pick it up 4 or 5 years later because I like the author, and I get 5 chapters in and I'm thinking, wait, I think I've read this before, because guess what? I forgot 90% of it, right? We want to get them beyond reading and words and seeing. We want to get them to the middle and definitely down towards the bottom of this pyramid, where they're participating in discussions. So they're taking ownership of it, right? They're giving talks or presentations in your classroom, because 70%, this is why groups are so important and active engagement with our peers are so important. 70% is they'll remember what they say. And the other one is if they say and do it, then you also get that percent of doing dramatic, you get 90% and those forward. But we're going to go to breakout room. What I'd like you guys to do is I want you to think about what peer-to-peer active engagement strategies you're currently using in your classroom, or those that you might like to use as you're thinking about creating ownership and student self-management. Welcome back, guys. I hope you guys had some really good conversations in your breakout rooms. If something came up that was kind of cool on how somebody, either you said or they said, turn and talk, I love it. That's one. Thinking about what is that peer-to-peer active engagement. What I like about this class in particular is it really has so many places that you can take it. You may have tried a playlist previously, or you may have tried, station rotation previously, or you may tried small groups groups, or maybe now's a good time to a small project since you're getting to the end of the semester? Or how do you want to do your reviews prior to finals? How do you want to set those up? So thinking about how it can, one, be peer to peer and very active in engagement, where students are one of two things here. Think about that thriving. They're being resilient in their learning because they're getting some new learning. They're getting ideas from their peers. They're rethinking. They're being resilient. There's lots of different things that we can do when we think about what we can do for the 5 additional hours for professional development here. So let's talk about those types of things. When we want students to self-manage and own, look at those. Yeah, there's some great ideas coming up in chat there. When we want students to self-manage and own, what I like to think about when I do this is I believe inside of us, there's lots of these things that we just need to practice. A lot of it is just practice. You heard me say a moment ago that if we practice something 7 times, it's ingrained. I have to unlearn it. And that's why classroom structures, remember at the beginning, we talked about the culture of learning, and a piece of that culture of learning is putting in some classroom structures where my students feel safe in this environment. They feel safe in voicing their opinions. They feel safe in risking, putting their thoughts out. So a couple ways you can do that is by putting a social contract together. If you haven't done one of those, this is a great way to build that culture. I love slant, and I've seen this happen in middle schools as well as elementary, where the teachers practice 7 times slant and talking about what does it look like. You sit up, you lean forward, you ask questions, you nod. Your eyes are tracking the learner, right? And I can be in a classroom, and it's so funny. I could see this culture in this classroom. The teacher will just say slant, and boom, that whole classroom changed because they learned how to be an active learner. They've learned what are the steps to do that. Another one I've seen around town, and you probably have seen this one as well, is champs. And what I love about champs is the S part of champs. What is it going to take for me to be successful in your classroom? And the conversation, the C in champs, and you've probably seen your voice level needs to be 0. Here's an example, probably as if you were preparing for a test, you want a voice level of 0. But if you were in groups, the voice level in the room is going to be a 1 or a 2. And what am I doing? And how am I participating? And what does movement look like in my classroom? These are great ways to put in some classroom structures into your culture of learning. Also, what you want to do is you want to give kids an opportunity to practice innate. And that's what I really feel. I feel like these habits of mine are innate. They're innate, persistence, striving for accuracy. These are innate skills. When I say innate, that means that everybody has them, but we just need to practice them. I'm going to say, find 3 words or 3 habits of mind that you want to bring into your classroom. And maybe as you're looking at this, if it's big enough for you, what are the 3 that you like? I personally like number 13, taking responsible risk, not just guessing, but taking responsible risks. I love number 15, thinking interdependently, meaning my small group matters, not just my voice, but my small group matters. Now on this slide, you'll see that I have a bit.ly there. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up into chat for you. If you want to see how I set up station rotations in my professional development, I use recipe cards. If you want to look at a recipe card, this is a great one to look at for the 16 habits of mine. So I went into Microsoft and I used a recipe card to do station rotation where people go and they do different things. Number 4, thinking flexible. As you're going through this course and you're thinking, hey, Kim, I want to try some of these things. There are so many things that you can try. And so please think flexibly. What can you do? And what do you want to try in your classroom? So the key here, of course, is understanding we need to make our culture in our classroom with some building blocks for learning. Now, the turnaround for children, I love this. I know they've changed their name and they're now working with ASU, Arizona State University. But really what they're saying, look, is if we want to get kids to self-direction and independence and sustainability, which is at the top of these building blocks, we have to give them some foundations. We have to make sure that they feel attached in our classroom. We have to make sure that they understand, that they have self-awareness and social awareness and relationship skills, and they need practice. They need practice before they even get to the blue line in the middle of this, which is mindset, where we get self-advocacy and how we talk about a sense of belonging and growth mindset. So think about your classroom and how are you building these blocks for the learning to grow in your classroom. What I like to say, here's one that you can try, is mantras. I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins. And one of the things that Tony Robbins says is in the morning, man, let's change our attitude. Let's use some mantras. Let's say some things over because we want students to create agency and ownership. Well, how about one way of doing it is with words? The words that come out of my mouth are going to become actuality. So, hey, today I want everybody to repeat after me. My ability and competency grows with my effort. Everybody repeat after me. My ability and competency grows with my effort. Right? How about the bottom here? It says, this work has value for me, or I belong to this academic community. Say these in your classroom. Start it in the morning. We're going to say it 3 times. Guess what? By the end of the week, they're going to own it because they've practiced it 7 times. How about I can succeed at this? Before we head off into small groups, I want everybody to repeat after me 3 times. I can succeed at this. I can succeed at this. I can succeed at this. What are we going to get? Momentum. We're going to get movement growing into our small groups and really changing the atmosphere and agency and ownership in our classroom. So thinking about how do we move our kids to shifting to ownership? We got to change what we do. We have to change what we do. We have to move away from that teacher directed stage 1 over here, right? Get away from us doing the majority of the learning. And that's why the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is so important, guys, right? When we think about that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, a third of the time, I want to give away to my students. I want to build relationships by teaching, by walking around. But for me to do that, I need to create some fun, engaging, peer-to-peer, active projects, things where kids are getting their hands on and they're working with each other and creating ownership and self-managing. That's why, again, I think I've showed you guys classroom screen in the past. Absolutely love it. I put a timer up and say you have 5 minutes, and I let the timer, not me, but the timer for the kids up there to tell them, okay, you have 1 minute. Okay, you have 30 seconds, those types of things. That's where they start self-managing. What we want to move to that third stage where we're co-facilitating. That's really when they're taking ownership. Not only can they tell us the how, the why, the what, but the when they can do things. That's when we design lessons that help our students practice these skills. I love it when we think about, wow, we've got all this technology. Well, the technology is not always the important part. Part of that is also thinking about how do we create environments? How do we create pedagogy in our classroom? Sometimes with technology where they might create a podcast or a video, but also how can I help them practice some of those habits of mind? The key here, guys, and we've talked about this in the past, those of you that have been with me, is helping them understand, and this goes back to that culture of learning, is helping them understand the process of learning. Yes, it's scary. Yes, it's hard work. Yes, there's a pit and you're going to feel uncomfortable and your stomach's going to be uncomfortable and your mind's not going to want to speak anything out. But guess what? We can climb out of that. This is the process of learning. Just like we were talking about shooting baskets a moment ago. You're not going to be great at shooting baskets the first time you do it. You're not going to be great the first time you do the quadratic formula either. So helping our students understand that, yes, there is this pit, but we can climb out of that pit. We have strategies to get out of there. Guess and check. We can ask 3 before me. I can Google it. I can read a textbook. Believe it or not, yeah, we can still do that. There are lots of different ways that we can get to the top of that pit and climb out. So helping our students understand that. And even if you had this language in your classroom, and even if you've introduced it, maybe this is a really good time to think about asking your kids, where are you in the pit right now? When we think about the learning pit or dip, I know some of you called it the dip. Where are you right now? Are you at the bottom? Are you a little confused? Or are you climbing out? And what strategies are you using? Helping them thinking about their learning process. And when we do that, guys, when we do that, we're building those social emotional learning skills, those competencies that we want our kids. That's self-management. No more pounding on the table, right? Because I'm aware that that distracts other people. I am going to make responsible decisions because I know I have 5 minutes. Our group has 5 minutes to get through this. Let's do it. right? And thinking about that relationship skills, we're really, not only are we thinking about when we put our kids, not just in pair shares or shoulder partners, but small groups of threes and fours. And those are my ultimate size. I don't like to even get up to fours. I like threes because somebody doesn't ever fill out. But we're also helping them understand that not everybody has the same, same background. Because if we're asking them to talk about different things in their homes and different things that, how they organize and what some of the climates that they're living in, we get to understand that we're all different and it's okay to be different. And so if I'm different, then guess what? I can take risks because I'm not afraid of being different. We are all different. So I then create that social awareness of who I am as well as where I fit in this society. So I love this. I saw this on social media this week. And so I thought I'm going to bring it in here. This actually comes from April Seeley. She talks about one of the things that we can do to help kids with social awareness and just understanding their own ownership is asking for feedback. Do I want something, do I want to set up a one-on-one conference for my teacher, or do I want written notes, this or that? When I'm working with my peers, do I want anonymous feedback, or do I want a one-on-one with one of my classmates to talk about the learning that I just did with this project? Or how about for myself when I'm thinking about feedback? How about I rate myself on this rubric? And I'm a big fan of single point rubrics, and if you haven't seen those are great. Love it, because it's very similar to the grows and learns. And so that's another way with this and that. And I just saw this and I thought I got to share it, have to share it. So when you're thinking this time about self-management and ownership, think about how do we help kids thrive. When you thought and you saw that thriving, these are lifelong durable skills, but if we are the only person who knows what's going to happen in that lesson, and if we're the only person who knows when the quiz or test is, or if we're the only person that's looking at student data and they're not looking at their own data, they don't know when a test or quiz is coming up, they don't know what's going to happen at the end of the week, we have to let those things go. Because when we give those out, or what we call like a week at a glance, or WAG, you probably have seen that acronym as well, but when we give that away to our students, much like in the playlist, we give the whole lesson to our students, they can then take ownership. They can then manage their own learning. So as you're going through the Canvas course, lots of great learning going on there, lots of examples. This one is a great way to try something that you've done in the past, to bring it back in and say, hey, I want to try station rotation again, or I want to try a playlist again. I want to try using this small group activity, or maybe use this project. So there's lots of different ways that you can earn those 5 extra professional development credits.